Hey guys, David here. This is day 10 of crypto, DeFi, and PegNet. And today I want to talk about governance and decentralized governance. And you guys may have noticed the flags that are behind me. Um, Iceland, New Hampshire, Switzerland, AnarchoCapitalism. This is actually a historical timeline of human freedom. So, for those history buffs out there, you may know that the folks that settled Iceland were fleeing a very strict monarchy in Norway, and they came up with a very decentralized approach compared to most of the monarchies of the day, where they would have the thing, which was the world's first parliament, and they would get together once a year and they would set the laws, and effectively there were hundreds of what we would call nobles but warlords effectively of Iceland that would all be involved in the process of creating those laws and enforcing those laws. So it was a very interesting experiment in time, and sort of set the stage for later parliaments and later uh, improvements towards more decentralized governance. Similarly, in the 1700s, uh, New Hampshire put together probably one of the most pro liberty constitutions ever, enshrined an enormous number of rights for the people of New Hampshire, and as a result, is one of the most prosperous US states by GDP and quality of living. Um, Very low tax, very high on personal rights and liberties. In the 1800s, we had the Swiss Constitution in 1848, and they took a lot of inspirations from the earlier US Constitution and sort of a federalist approach of having states, in the case of Switzerland, cantons, which hold a lot of the powers locally. And there's not a lot of power held at the federal level in the Swiss system. And then finally, pure capitalism, pure market based solutions where there is no state, I think is sort of the ultimate destiny of human governance, is to really have individuals enter into consensual contracts and decide what they need without a central authority, without intermediaries, without a middleman involved, right? And this brings us to crypto. What I think is most interesting about crypto is the decentralized governance. What has made Bitcoin, Ethereum, and all these projects so compelling is they're effectively governed by voice and exit. You have different means. You can become a miner, and decide what software you want to run. As a user, you can opt into a system that you like its policies and its code. And you can put your value in that system. And if you don't like the choices that community is making, you can withdraw your value. You can sell your coins and go somewhere else. And so these very simple, elegant levers of voice and exit, I think, are ultimately the most powerful ways to do governance. Um, I often think that there's a temptation to do much more elaborate governance, to create effective, replications of representative democracy, for example, and to have people in a system voice their opinion on a huge range of topics. And effectively, you normally fall into some sort of bureaucracy, right? A series of committees and bureaucracies are created, and people make proposals, and it sort of gets more and more elaborate over time. And as long as the competencies of that representative body or those people that can make those policies is unbounded, as long as they can make any rules they like, I think that leads to centralization and worse sort of outcomes over time, especially if those rules are applied to everyone. What is much more effective, I think, is competition. in rules. Switzerland really exemplifies that in the modern world, with having very localized power at the canton and municipal level. They're able to experiment locally. For example, Zug was the canton that first embraced crypto back in 2014, with Ethereum and others moving there. And that really proved sort of extremely successful. And other cantons have now copied many of their policies. And now even some laws have been passed at the federal level in Switzerland regarding, how they treat crypto and blockchain projects. And so that's, I think, much more powerful, is if you can take things and you can put them down to their lowest possible level, distribute the power to the edges of the network as much as possible. And there's no smaller minority than the individual. And so systems that reward and allow the individual maximum extent of consent and power to opt in and opt out of those systems, I think are much better off. And that's partly why I think systems that have simple parameters tend to do better. One of the intentions, not one of the outcomes, but one of the intentions of the Constitution in the US when it was originally framed, was to make very specific powers for the federal government, the states, and the people. And effectively left anything not delegated to the federal government or the states to the people, right? So it said the federal government can have an army and can have taxation and it can have such and such powers. In the EU context, in their Lisbon Treaty, they're described as competencies. So the EU has certain competencies, the member states have certain competencies, and others are left to a local level. And the more I think you can narrow down universal competencies, the better the outcome, because the world is so complex. There are so many different needs and different incentives that people have, different desires and things they want to accomplish. It's very, very difficult to get good outcomes if you use a very broad brush and make universal pronouncements about so many different policies. Usually leads to bad outcomes. So that's, I think, what is great about PegNet is the developers and the community early on said, we don't want committees, we don't want bureaucracies, we don't want a bunch of rules, we're not going to have a foundation. There is no company, there's no token sale, there's no pre-mine, there's no founders reward. People can donate open source, developers, and miners can run software. And that's pretty much it. Over time, there was the addition of a reward for arbitrageurs, and that's pretty much been it. It's a very simple approach to governance, but I think a very elegant one, and one that has proven very successful in projects like Bitcoin Cash and projects like Ethereum, where there isn't an enormous amount of complexity at the top, and it allows people in the system itself to have the maximum amount of freedom. And ultimately, there's effectively a number of vetoes and levers of governance that are still in place. If somebody comes up with an idea, they can code it, they can offer it to the community as a PegNet improvement proposal, but nothing forces the miners or the exchanges or the wallets or any of the members of the community to update their software. So anybody can make a suggestion. It's not necessarily going to be accepted, right? And so this creates effectively a marketplace for ideas, and people able to offer ideas that are compelling to all the different stakeholders in the community are readily adopted. We've seen a number of updates in the code, and the miners and exchanges and everybody have been happy to update the code, especially when it's adding new features and capabilities and things like that. Whereas, adjusting the economics or adjusting, the inflation schedule, or these other things have been much more debated and contentious and require a lot more discussion in order to get people aligned, right? And some of those proposals haven't succeeded, and some of them have. But I think that's a healthy way to approach governance, is focus on systems that are simple and elegant, align the stakeholders, and really sort of respect that people in the crypto world have consent, have voice, and can exercise their exit if they choose. And that's the best way to keep any project or any governance model accountable, is when it can't be a monopoly, when it can't force anyone to use its solution or software. You know, the old joke is that government is idea is so great they have to be mandatory. Right? You know, that's sort of the implication, right? Because if it's a government law, then, you know, it has to be done, right? So I think the more things that we can leave to, you know, consent and voluntary interaction, the better off we'll be as a society, but the better we'll be off in the crypto world, is to not necessarily replicate the old systems of the past, but rather to sort of move down this continuum down towards as much individual empowerment as possible. So anyway, sort of a bit of a historical, philosophical, and governance-filled update today. But things are moving quickly. It's really exciting to see all the developments going on in DeFi and PegNet. And so I'll be talking more this coming week. My crypto shirt of the day is, you may have noticed, the narwhal and Bildel from Osaka. This was a DevCon shirt from last year, the Ethereum conference, which is usually one of the best every year and gathers together thousands of people building all of these tools for this open community. So, you know, support open source, support these ideas. It's exciting to be involved in something where you can have real voice, and it doesn't just roll around every few years when there's a vote. You can have a real voice in crypto. And so get involved, you know, and contribute what you can. Put your value in these kind of systems. They are more robust, they are faster moving, and they are certainly going to outcompete in these tumultuous times. So thank you guys for watching. Appreciate you being part of the journey. Wash your hands, be kind to one another, and I will see you guys tomorrow. Take care. Bye.